Sometimes I feel like I'm stuck between the work I want to create and the way I've always done it in the past. For example, in the past, I would have taken something like this and created something like this. But the literal doesn't interest me at this point in time. I enjoy processes that create room for the viewer's interpretation. In this video, I create some collage papers inspired by Northern Manitoba's rocky shorelines, creating prints which evoke the essence of these natural formations without being overly literal. Inspired by a method I discovered on Yates Makes, I layer charcoal over gel-printed backgrounds to achieve a textured, atmospheric effect. Creating the drawing for the charcoal transfer is very, very easy. All you need is a few little bits of willow charcoal. You can also use compressed charcoal. It's a little darker. Yeah, just whatever you happen to have on hand is fine. Because this is my inspiration and theme for the next few little pieces of work, I'm using these two photographs simply as kind of a reference when I'm drawing. So I'm just going to have this up here. I'm not going to follow it along. It's just really for use as examples. And I just want a few good lines. All of these will be chopped up and used in bits and pieces, so none of them have to be particularly realistic or faithful to the original or anything else like that. It's just basically about a bit of a pattern, a bit of an inspiration. A few little wiggly lines. Some of these might be more sort of geometric type forms. Or you could also, of course, be working on quite a realistic piece and then transferring that as well. So some of these lines I want to be good and heavy in areas, so I'm just going to make sure I get a good bit of charcoal on those. And then others I would want to be kind of wispy, and I would want them to be a little bit more suggestive. Now, if you have a smaller piece of charcoal, you can use it on its side. It will pick up some of the green from the paper, which could give you quite an interesting result as well. And if you have something that you don't like on any part of them, or you want to create a finer line somewhere and it's a bit blobby, all you need to do is take an eraser and then go through it or over it. You can smudge it, clean off some highlights if you like. Really, anything that you do with charcoal at this point can be used in this method. So that will transfer quite well to the gel plate, which I'll show you in the next segment. Now, if you have one that you've already transferred, you'll have something with a whole lot less charcoal on it because most of it's already been lifted off. But that certainly doesn't mean that you can't add a bit more charcoal to it. Just have to remember that even though there's some faint charcoal there, it may not actually show up. So you need to work back into it and make sure you've got some fresh charcoal on there. But once I've put this extra charcoal on it, I'll be able to use it again for another transfer. It's a good chance to alter it too if you found you had too much charcoal or too many darks in a certain area or whatever else. You can update it and make it better the second time round. I've also pulled out a small selection of soft pastels. So these are all quite soft. So what I want to do with this is I want to start with a little bit of the same old, just breaking up the space and hopefully an interesting way. But this time I would like to add a little bit of color with the soft pastel just to see what that does when I do the transfer itself. I really enjoy this sort of licheny stuff that's everywhere up in northern Manitoba. It has this incredible orange glow. And that's pretty mild, but I don't want to go over the top with color either. And then I've also got some dark grayish ones, which I think will be interesting in some of the shadows. And again, I'm not going for any kind of representational look. Along the top, there is sort of a band of stuff that's worked into the rocks. And of course, any of that could be smudged a little. And then I've also got, I think this one, some softer tones coming that I want to come through this as well. And I'm thinking that this might be somewhat interesting, but I'll have to see how it looks on the plate. I'm working in a very subdued color palette for this particular exercise, but you know, I might not always be doing that, so it's nice to see how some of these other colors might go on the plate. Okay, we'll see how that works when I transfer that to the plate. Ooh, messy alert. Now I've already printed a few backgrounds for the charcoal transfers that are inspired by the rocks. Here's a couple of them here, and I'm going to demonstrate today how I do these ones. Pretty simple stuff. I just want something fairly light, kind of blotchy as the rocks are, or possibly I do sometimes with a bit more paint applied with a brush and get a little bit more color on. But today I'm kind of looking for the ones that are a little bit softer. So I'm going to use a wee bit, I want this to be faint, so I'm just going to use a wee dab of the transparent red iron oxide. And again, I usually use golden opens for this type of stuff. And I want a little bit of Payne's Gray. Payne's Gray is bluish, at least the golden one is, and but not intense at all. So I just want a little dab of that, a little darker at the bottom, maybe something like that. And then I'm going to roll it out. I'm going to kind of work a little at the rolling. I want to get a nice smooth coat, but I want it to be quite thin, so not at all as heavy as I usually do when I'm starting to print the botanicals. And this is something else I've found that's kind of fun to do and gives me more of a splotchy look for the rocks, is to just take a Holbein watercolor spray bottle, which is a bit of a unique beast. If you can find one of these, they're not expensive, but they sort of spit rather than spray. You just very lightly depress the top and it does that. Now what that's going to do is when I roll over it again, it's going to give me all kinds of freckles. And I don't want to roll the freckles out. I want to be a little cautious with those, but there we go. So now I can go ahead and lift this. I think each of us takes a technique and then adapts it to their own practice, their own visual language, and it becomes theirs. So there's the first one. This one will be a little bit darker in color. But remember, this is on tissue, so when I collage that on top of something else, if the thing that's underneath is fairly intense contrast, then it will definitely show through. And even though there doesn't look like there's anything much left on that plate, I can take a ghost, and that will pretty much pull everything else off. And this one will be quite delicate. So if I'm looking for something that's more charcoal, more crevices, so to speak, and less of the color of the rock itself, yeah, that one's fainter, but quite interesting. So now, to transfer the charcoal itself, I'm just going to make sure this plate is clean first. That's just water in the spray bottle and a little bit of a paper towel. See, there's just a little bit of ink left or paint left on the plate. Now, the first one that I'm going to do is just this one. And all I have to do to transfer it from here, from the charcoal, onto the plate, just turn it over, and then just give it a good press. This is so much easier than any of the other transfer methods, going from printers or magazines or doing resists and things like that. There's a lot of very interesting methods that you can work with the plate. This one's quite foolproof. If you've got enough charcoal on your paper, you will get an impression like this on your plate. Isn't that gorgeous? Now, we all know that charcoal smudges, and this doesn't. Once you've got it on the plate, it's kind of grabbed it. So now I'm going to take one of the dry backgrounds that I've done, and I'm going to pull this. Now at this point, I don't want to add any more color to this plate. The color is going to come from the background I'm printing it on. So I'm just going to put on a little bit of matte medium. And give that a gentle roll out. And I just want to make sure that it covers the entire surface, particularly the charcoal area. There we go. Trying to think of which way was up on this. I think this way is the way I'd like to print this. And I can see through the tissue, so I can just put it down. And again, this is not like having to pick up multiple layers of paint or anything else like that. You don't have to wait till it's dry and peel it off and hope it doesn't stick to the plate, etc. Because all we're picking up here is the charcoal, and it comes off pretty easily. So this is all in real time. I didn't stop and dry this or anything else. There we go. So there it is. My little piece that suggests in a non-representational way the cragginess of those rocks. And I'm just going to give this a little wipe off, make sure that there's no matte medium still on there. So this one is the one that I showed you where I added charcoal to a pre-existing one that I'd used for this process. So there is possibly some marks on here that won't come off because they've already been transferred, but all of the new charcoal will come off on the plate. There we go. Oh yeah. So you can see this is paler now, but I could again put more charcoal in here if I wanted to. I could alter it. I could erase some, do whatever I wanted to, and use it for another print. So this is a print, background that I made that I kind of like. It was just brushed on and very, very thinly, and I think this is actually a ghost of the one that I created. So put on a bit more matte medium. If you'd like to try this, but you're concerned your drawing skills aren't very good, obviously this could be used for abstract things. You could draw rectangles, circles, all sorts of patterns. But you could also trace. So you could use some tracing paper to put the charcoal on, and then you could transfer it from the tracing paper. That would also work. So the matte medium pretty much right away picks up the charcoal. And charcoal releases very nicely from the gel plate. By the way, don't try this with graphite, i.e. pencils. Pencils don't release from the plate, as I have discovered to my annoyance. They're there permanently, so don't try to transfer pencil. Yeah, that's a very good transfer from that used drawing. If a little bit of the charcoal doesn't come up, it's just going to come off with a cloth and a bit of water. And when I'm done any kind of process like this, once I have all the acrylic off of the plate, I will take the plate to the sink and give it a good soap and water cleanup, just to make sure everything's off of it. Now this is the one I thought I would try that also has soft pastel in it. So the process is just the same. Put it on the plate and give it a good rub. Well, that's good. A fair bit of that came off. And you can see there's quite a remnant here if I wanted to work back in it and use it again. And I'm going to transfer it onto this one. I quite like the splotchy pattern that this one has. Oh yeah, that pastel is creating some interesting patterns and colors in there. So yeah, you can definitely see where it's picked up, and it's imparting a bit of that rough character about the rocks too. By the way, the advantage for doing this is that now that it's on here, Nothing is going to come up. It is now fixed to this paper with that matte medium. So let's take a look at the results of this. This is the first one, which I showed you. It was a fresh charcoal drawing, and it was put onto a background I'd created with a bit of spritz and paint, and then transferred onto tissue. So this will definitely show what's underneath. If I collage it onto something, we'll be able to see through it. And I'm quite pleased with that result. This is the second one that we did. This was reusing a charcoal drawing, which I'd added some additional charcoal to. And then it was using a background which was created with a brush in very soft paint colors. And I think there's some special pieces of this that I'll be able to use in collages. This is the one that was created using the soft pastel as well as the charcoal. And if you look in here, you can really see some of the granular effect of that soft pastel. If you would like to see how I use these in mixed media work, I'll put 2 videos on the screen now that you can look at to see how I've actually used some of these pieces.